On the 11th of July, 2007, at 2347 hours Bagram local time, a 31-year-old Taliban courier named Mohammed K. broke a United States Army interrogator's nose with the edge of a metal interrogation table. He did it by waiting 6 weeks. He did it by sitting in that chair, in that room, across that table, for 41 sessions in a row, saying nothing until the fourth interrogator, a captain, 6'1", 210 pounds, 3 combat tours, a man who had been told by his battalion commander on the morning of the 11th of July that if he did not get this detainee to talk by the end of the week, he could explain to a 1-star general personally why a Tier 1 financial target was going to keep moving 60% of the Taliban's money through eastern Afghanistan for another year. Until that captain leaned across the table at 2347 and grabbed the front of Mohammed K's jumpsuit with 2 hands. Mohammed K did not resist. Mohammed K let himself be pulled forward across the table. And then, at the exact moment the captain's center of balance crossed the edge, Mohammed K dropped his weight, planted his cuffed wrists, and drove the captain's face down into the steel. Once, the MP outside the door heard it through 2 inches of concrete. By the time the MP got the door open, the captain was on the floor with blood coming out of his nose and his mouth and a flap of skin hanging off his left eyebrow. And Mohammed K was sitting back in his chair, hands folded on the table in front of him, looking at the wall. He had not said a word. He did not say a word that night. He did not say a word the next day, or the day after that, or the day after that. 6 days later, on the 17th of July, 2007, at 1412 hours, the United States Army sent a 5'6" female chief warrant officer with light blonde hair into that same room, alone, with no MP inside, no zip cuffs on the detainee, and 2 tin cups of tea. She sat down across from a man who had broken a captain's face 6 days earlier. She set 1 cup in front of him. She set the other cup in front of herself. She drank her tea. She did not say a single word for 47 minutes. 14 days later, that same man, Mohammed K, Taliban Courier, 6 weeks of nothing, a captain's broken nose on his record, transfer order to Guantanamo Bay signed and dated and counting down. Gave her 7 names for courier routes, 3 Hawala locations, a financier in Dubai, and the face of a Tier 1 target nobody in the United States intelligence community had ever seen. He gave her all of it across 2 hours and 11 minutes on the 27th of July, 2007. And on the last page of the report she filed 3 days later, on the 30th of July, 2007, there's a question he asked her at the end of that 2 hour and 11-minute session. And there's an answer she wrote down that she gave him, and that question and that answer are the reason I am making this video 16 years later. Because I have read that page approximately 40 times since I first obtained a redacted copy of it in October of 2023, and I still do not entirely understand how a human being arrives at the age of 33 in a war zone on day 11 of a 14-day window with the words she gave him ready in her mouth. Her name was Annika Lindqvist. She went by Anki. She was a Chief Warrant Officer 3 in United States Army Counterintelligence. She is still alive. She is still serving. She is on the Chief Warrant Officer 5 selection list as of the month I am recording this. And the rest of this video is the story of what she did in that room between the 17th of July and the 31st of July, 2007, to a man who 6 days earlier had put a combat tour army captain on the floor of a Bagram interrogation room with a broken face. She did it without raising her voice. She did it without ever asking him a single question for the first 3 days. She did it with 2 tin cups of tea, a paperback book of 13th century Persian poetry, and one piece of information she walked out of that room on day 7 to find for him, which she brought back to him on day 10, and which broke him in a way that 6 weeks and 4 men and 1 broken nose had not. Sit with me a minute. I want to tell you how. Muhammad K. I'm not going to give you his full surname in this video. The reasons for that will become clear by the end. Muhammad K., 31 years old at the time of his detention, born in a village outside Khost in the Paktia province of Afghanistan in 1976, captured by a joint United States Special Forces and Afghan National Army element on the 5th of June, 2007, in a compound 12 kilometers from the Pakistani border. He was not a fighter. He had never fired a weapon at an American or a coalition soldier. He was a courier. He carried envelopes. He carried thumb drives. He carried, on one occasion documented in a captured Taliban accounting ledger that I have seen photographs of, approximately 2.3 million United States dollars in cash, in a black canvas backpack with a torn left strap repaired with green thread, from a hawala in Quetta, Pakistan, to a compound outside Kandahar, Afghanistan, on the 14th of March, 2007. The ledger entry for that transfer listed his name, the date, the amount, and 3 letters. The 3 letters were the initials of the man who received the money. Those 3 letters are the reason Muhammad K. was at Bagram. The man whose initials were on that ledger was, in the summer of 2007, one of the 7 highest priority financial targets in the senior leadership structure of the Taliban. He was, in the bureaucratic language of the United States intelligence community, a Tier 1 personality. He moved money. He moved a great deal of money. The Defense Intelligence Agency assessed, in a memorandum dated the 12th of April, 2007, 3 months before Anki Lindqvist walked into that interrogation room with 2 cups of tea, that this man was responsible for the financing of approximately 60% of all Taliban operations in 3 provinces in eastern Afghanistan. Muhammad K. had seen his face. Muhammad K. had handed him a backpack. Muhammad K. was, as of the summer of 2007, one of perhaps 11 people in coalition custody who could place this man in a specific room at a specific time on a specific date. That is why the captain on the 11th of July had been told that he had until the end of the week. That is why, 6 days later, on the 17th of July, with the captain still in the base hospital and the transfer order to Guantanamo Bay already signed for the 31st of July, the United States Army's Joint Interrogation and Debriefing Center at Bagram Air Base made a decision that, in the institutional history of post-Abu Ghraib American interrogation, is documented in exactly 1 paragraph of 1 declassified after-action review and is referenced nowhere else. They sent in the warrant officer. They sent her in alone. They sent her in unarmed. They sent her in with no MP inside the room. They sent her in with a paperback book and 2 cups of tea. Her name was Annika Lindqvist. She went by Anki. Ankai. It is a Swedish diminutive. Her mother gave it to her when she was 3 days old in a hospital in Minneapolis in 1974. Her mother was a registered nurse. Her mother had been born in a town called Kiruna, which is the northernmost municipality in Sweden, 200 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, in 1948. She had immigrated to the United States in 1969 at the age of 21 to work at a hospital in Minneapolis where her cousin was already employed in the maternity ward. Her mother's name was Ingrid Lindqvist. She never married. She told her daughter, when her daughter was old enough to ask, which was the spring of 1985, when Anki was 11 years old and had come home from school and asked who her father was. She told her daughter that her father had been a graduate student in chemistry at the University of Minnesota in 1973, that they had known each other for approximately 4 months, that he had returned to Stockholm in the autumn of 1973, not knowing that Ingrid was pregnant, that she had not contacted him to tell him, and that she did not intend to. She told her daughter that this had been her decision and that she stood by it. She told her daughter that she was sorry if her daughter found this inadequate, but that she was not going to apologize for it. Anki, at 11 years old, asked her mother one follow-up question. The follow-up question was, quote, "Did you love him?" End quote. Her mother said, quote, "I liked him. Loving is different. I love you." End quote. Anki did not ask another question about her father in that conversation or in any conversation afterward for the rest of her mother's life. Her mother died on the 8th of November, 2003, in a single-vehicle accident on Interstate 35 outside Duluth, Minnesota, in heavy snow at the age of 55. Anki was 29 years old. She had been in the United States Army for 7 years. She had been in counterintelligence for 4 of those 7 years. She was, at the time her mother died, deployed to Kuwait in preparation for follow-on operations into Iraq. She flew home on emergency leave. She buried her mother. She went back. She did not, in the 4 years between her mother's death and the day she walked into that interrogation room at Bagram with 2 cups of tea, talk to anyone in the United States Army about her mother. Not her commanding officer, not her peers, not the unit chaplain, not the soldier who shared her quarters at 3 different forward operating bases between 2003 and 2007. She kept one photograph of her mother in the lid of her field locker. It was a small photograph, 3 inches by 5, taken in the summer of 1989, when Anki was 15 years old and her mother was 41. Her mother was standing in the kitchen of their house in St. Paul. She was wearing a yellow sweater. She was holding a coffee cup. She was looking at the camera and laughing. Anki had taken the photograph herself on a disposable camera the summer her mother had let her stop wearing braces. That photograph was in her field locker at Bagram on the 17th of July, 2007. I know it was there because I asked her in a phone conversation in October of 2023, and she told me. She told me it had been in every field locker she had ever been issued, from her first deployment in 1999 to the deployment she was on at the time of our phone call. I'm telling you about her mother now, because in 6 days on the 23rd of July, 2007, Mohammed K. was going to say the name Fatima across that metal table in that interrogation room in Bagram, and Anki Lindqvist was going to do something with what he said that I have not been able to explain to myself in 16 years of reading the report in any way other than the obvious one. She knew what it was to have a mother whose name you said out loud to strangers and meant it. Day 2. Day 2 was the 18th of July, 2007. Same room, same table, same time, 1412 hours, Bagram local. She walked in. She set down 2 tin cups of tea. She sat down. She did not say a word. He had drunk none of yesterday's tea. Today's tea was fresh. Steam was coming off it. He looked at the tea. He looked at her. He did not drink. She sat there for 53 minutes. She drank her tea. She stood up. She picked up her cup. She left the other one on his side of the table. She walked to the door. She knocked twice. The MP let her out. That was day 2. I want to stop here and tell you something, because if I do not tell you now, you're going to spend the next half hour of this video assuming this is a story about a clever woman who tricked a man into talking by being nice to him. And that is not what this story is. This story is about silence. The new Army Field Manual 2 to 22.3, the one that came out in September of 2006 after Abu Ghraib, after the photographs, after the resignations, after the congressional hearings. That field manual contained 19 approved interrogation techniques. It contained, by name and by definition, the technique that Anki Lindqvist used on Mohammed K. between the 17th of July and the 31st of July, 2007. The technique is listed in the manual as approach technique number 3. Its formal name is rapport build. Its informal name, among interrogators who actually used it and who actually understood what it was a single word. The word was presence. Presence is sitting in a room with another human being and not asking them for anything. Presence is not a trick. Presence is the absence of the trick. For men had sat in that room with Mohammed K. for 6 weeks and had spent every minute of those 6 weeks asking him for something. Not always loudly, not always with threats, sometimes very quietly, very politely, with great cultural sensitivity and excellent translation, but always asking, always wanting, always waiting for him to give them what they had come to get. The fourth one, the captain, had asked with his hands on the front of Mohammed K.'s jumpsuit. Anki Lindqvist walked into that room, and she did not want anything from him. For 3 days. That was the whole technique. That was all of it. There is nothing more to it than that. If there is a secret to this story, that is the secret. And I'm telling it to you now before the second half of the video because the rest of the story is not about the technique. The rest of the story is about what happens to a human being when, after 6 weeks of every person in the world wanting something from him, somebody sits down across a table and wants nothing. Day 3 was the 19th of July, 2007. Same room, same table, same time. She walked in. She set down 2 cups of tea. She sat down. This time she had something else with her. She had a small paperback book. The book was a Penguin Classics edition of the collected poems of Jalaluddin Rumi in English translation, published in 2004, 287 pages. Cover price $9.95. Cover slightly creased at the upper right corner from having lived in the side pocket or rucksack for 3 deployments. She set the book on the table next to her own teacup. She opened it. She read. She did not read out loud. She read silently for 51 minutes, turning the pages at a normal reading pace, occasionally taking a sip of her tea. He watched her. He did not touch his tea. She stood up at the end of the session. She picked up her cup. She picked up her book. She left his cup on the table. She walked to the door. She knocked twice. She left. That was day 3. Day 4 was a Friday, the 20th of July, 2007. Friday in Afghanistan is the holy day. The detention facility ran a modified schedule. Mohammed K. was given an hour in the morning between 0700 and 0800 hours to pray. Anki Lindqvist was aware of this. The interrogation session that day was scheduled for 1500 hours instead of 1412, to put 2 clear hours between the end of his afternoon prayer and the beginning of the session. She walked in at 1500 hours. She set down 2 cups of tea. She sat down. She opened her book. He spoke. It was the first thing he had said in a session with her. It was the first thing he had said in any session with any interrogator in 11 days. The 4 men before her had stopped getting verbal responses from him on the 6th of July. Between the 6th of July and the 20th of July, 14 days, Mohammed K. had said exactly 2 words to American personnel. Those 2 words had been said to a medic who had asked him on the 11th of July, the same day he broke the captain's nose several hours earlier, whether the bandage on his left hand was too tight. He had said no and thank you in Pashto. On the 20th of July, at approximately 1511 hours, he looked across the table at Anki Lindqvist, who was reading a Penguin Classics edition of Rumi, and he said in lightly accented English, quote, "That is a Sufi," end quote. She looked up from the book. She closed the book but she kept her finger between the pages to mark her place. She said, quote, "Yes." End quote. He said, quote, "You are reading a Sufi." End quote. She said, quote, "Yes." End quote. He said, quote, "Why?" End quote. She said, quote, "Because he is good." End quote. He looked at her for a long time. The interrogation room had a closed-circuit video camera in the upper corner above the door. The recording from that camera on the 20th of July, 2007, exists. It is classified. I have not seen it. I have read the transcript of the audio from that recording, which was released to me in heavily redacted form in 2023. The transcript indicates that there were 38 seconds of silence between his question and her answer, and an additional 1 minute and 47 seconds of silence after her answer. Then he said, quote, "My mother liked this one." End quote. He pointed at the book. She said, quote, "Did she read it to you?" End quote. He said, quote, "She read it to my sister. I listened." End quote. She said, quote, "How old were you?" End quote. He said, quote, "7. My sister was 4. End quote. She did not say anything. He did not say anything. After approximately 3 minutes of silence, he reached across the table and he picked up the tin cup of tea on his side, and he drank from it. He drank all of it. He set the empty cup back on the table. He did not say anything else for the rest of the session. She closed her book. She picked up her cup. She picked up his empty cup. She walked to the door. She knocked twice. She left. That was day 4. I want to be careful here. I want to be careful about how I tell you the next part, because the next part contains the moment that the 4 men who had failed with Muhammad K. for 6 weeks had been trying to engineer through threat and through pressure and in 2 documented sessions through methods that were not compliant with a new field manual. The moment that Anki Lindqvist engineered, instead, through the act of reading a paperback book of 13th century Persian poetry across a metal table for 3 consecutive afternoons without speaking. The moment was the speaking of his mother's name. In Muhammad K.'s culture, in his region, in his family, you do not say your mother's name to strangers. You do not say it to acquaintances. You do not say it to fellow soldiers, fellow workers, fellow travelers on a bus. You say it to your blood family. You say it to your wife after you are married. You say it in writing, in formal documents that require it. You do not say it to an American woman in a uniform in an interrogation room at a detention facility on a military base controlled by a foreign army that has invaded your country. To say it is to give that woman something. To say it is to admit that the woman in front of you is not a stranger anymore. On the 23rd of July, 2007, day 7 of the 14-day window, at 14:12 hours Bagram local, Anki Lindqvist walked into the room with 2 cups of tea and her book of Rumi. She set the cups down. She sat down. She opened the book. Muhammad K., before she could begin to read, said, quote, her name was Fatima. End quote. She closed the book. She did not say anything for approximately 20 seconds. The transcript records the silence. Then she said, quote, "Tell me about her." End quote. He did. He talked for 41 minutes. He talked about his mother, Fatima, who had been born in 1949 in a village in Paktia province, who had married his father in 1964 at the age of 15, who had given birth to 7 children, 4 of whom had lived past the age of 5. He talked about the way she made tea, black tea, with cardamom in a small pot, never sweetened. He talked about a green scarf she had worn. He talked about her hands and a song she had sung when she was kneading dough. He talked about the fact that she had taught herself to read at the age of 31 by sitting in on his older brother's lessons. He talked about a time when she had hidden him under a pile of carpets during a Soviet sweep of the village in 1986 when he was 10 years old. He talked about her death, which had occurred, he believed, because he had not been there, because he had been in Quetta on courier business, sometime in the spring of 2007. He believed she had died of a respiratory infection. He was not certain. He had been told by his cousin, in a phone call on the 14th of April, 2007, that his mother was very ill. He had been told by the same cousin, in a phone call on the 28th of April, 2007, that she had asked for him. He had not gone. He had been carrying the $2.3 million at the time. He had been told, in a phone call on the 11th of May, 2007, 4 weeks before his capture, that he should come home, that there had been a development, that he was needed. He had not gone. He had still been carrying the money. He had been captured on the 5th of June, 2007, in a compound 12 kilometers from the Pakistani border, without ever having returned home, without ever having seen his mother again, without knowing with certainty what had happened to her between the 11th of May and the day he was captured. He had been in American custody for 43 days on the 23rd of July, 2007, when he said her name to Anki Lindqvist across a metal table. He did not know, on the 23rd of July, whether his mother was alive or dead. He had not asked any of the 4 men before Anki Lindqvist. He had not asked because he had not believed any of them would know, and he had not believed any of them, if they did know, would tell him the truth. He looked at Anki Lindqvist at the end of his 41-minute account of his mother's life, and he said, quote, "Do you know if she is alive?" End quote. Anki Lindqvist said, quote, "I do not know. I will find out. I will tell you what I find out, whatever it is." End quote. He said, quote, "Why?" End quote. She said, quote, "Because you asked." End quote. She left the room at 15:12 hours. She walked directly to the office of the J2, the senior intelligence officer at Bagram, and she requested, in writing, a verification of the status of one Fatima K, resident of a specific village in Paktia province, as of the date of the request, the 23rd of July, 2007. The request was granted. The verification took 3 days. On the 26th of July, 2007, at 0900 hours, the J2's office informed Chief Warrant Officer 3 Lindqvist that Fatima K, age 58, had died on the 2nd of June, 2007, of pneumonia in her village in Paktia province, 3 days before her son's capture in a compound 12 kilometers from the Pakistani border. She had been buried on the 3rd of June, 2007. She had asked, in her final lucid hours, according to a relative whom coalition intelligence assets had spoken to in the village earlier that summer for unrelated reasons, and whose statement happened to be in the database, for her son Muhammad. She had asked 4 times. He had not come. He had not known she was dying that week. He had thought he had more time. He had been carrying money. Anki Lindqvist received this information at 0914 on the 26th of July, 2007. She read it twice. She walked back to her quarters. She sat on her bunk for an unknown amount of time. She did not tell anyone, then or later, what she did during that time. She walked to the interrogation room at 14:12 hours. She brought 2 cups of tea. She brought the book of Rumi. She sat down. She opened the book. Muhammad K. looked at her. She closed the book. She said, quote, "Your mother died on the 2nd of June, 3 days before you were captured. She asked for you 4 times in her last hours. She was buried on the 3rd of June in your village. I am sorry. I am so sorry." End quote. The transcript of the audio recording from the interrogation room on the 26th of July, 2007, between 14:13 hours and 15:08 hours, contains 55 minutes of one human being weeping and one human being sitting across a table from him, not saying anything. She did not say anything. She did not get up. She did not leave. She sat there. She drank her tea. She let him cry. At 15:08 hours, he wiped his face on the sleeve of his prison jumpsuit. He looked at her. He said, quote, "Thank you for telling me." End quote. She said, quote, "You're welcome." End quote. She picked up her cup. She picked up his cup. She picked up her book. She walked to the door. She knocked twice. She left. That was day 10. I'm going to stop here for a moment. I'm going to stop here because there is something I want you to think about. And if I do not stop the story to make you think about it, you're going to keep moving forward and you're not going to think about it. And the rest of this story does not work if you do not think about it. This is not a story about an interrogation. This is a story about what happens when, in the middle of a war, in a building designed for the extraction of information from human beings against their will, one person treats another person, for the first time in 43 days, like a son who has lost his mother instead of a problem to be solved. That is the whole story. Everything that happens after the 26th of July, 2007, in the room with Anki Lindqvist and Mohammed K, is a footnote to that fact. My daughter is a nurse. Her name is Claire. She works the night shift at a hospital in Charleston, South Carolina, and she has worked the night shift on and off for 9 years. She told me once. This was a phone call in 2019. She had been on shift for 13 hours. She was sitting in her car in the parking garage at 4 in the morning. She had called me because she did not want to drive home yet. She told me that the hardest part of her job was not the bleeding and not the dying and not the families. She told me the hardest part of her job was sitting with people who were scared and not telling them it was going to be okay, because she did not know if it was going to be okay, and lying to scared people was, in her opinion, worse than letting them be scared. She told me that what scared people needed was not reassurance. She told me that what scared people needed was somebody who was not scared sitting in a room with them and not going anywhere. I thought of my daughter when I read Anki Lindqvist's report. I thought of my daughter on the line that said, quote, "I sat there, I drank my tea, I let him cry." End quote. I'm not going to make a larger point about that. I'm going to let it sit. Day 11, the 27th of July, 2007. She walked in. 2 cups of tea. The book. She sat down. He spoke first. He said, quote, "I want to tell you something." End quote. She said, quote, "Okay." End quote. He said, quote, "I do not know if it is something you want." End quote. She said, quote, "Tell me what you want to tell me. I will let you know if I want it." End quote. He talked for 2 hours and 11 minutes. He gave her 7 names. He gave her 4 courier routes. He gave her 2 Hawala locations in Quetta and a 3rd one in a district of Karachi. He gave her the name of a financier in Dubai who had moved money into one of the Hawalas in the spring of 2006. He gave her the initials from the ledger. He gave her the face that went with the initials. He gave her, at the end of the 2 hours and 11 minutes, a description of a meeting that had taken place in a compound outside Kandahar on the 14th of March, 2007, at which he had handed a backpack, black canvas, torn left strap repaired with green thread, containing 2.3 million United States dollars to a man whose face he had seen, in person, in clear light, for approximately 11 minutes. He described the man's face. He described a small scar above the man's left eyebrow. He described the man's voice, soft, he said, surprisingly soft, almost a whisper. He described the man's hands. He said the man's hands shook slightly when he counted the money. He said he had thought, at the time, that the man might be sick. He described the way the man had counted the money, not by hand, but by passing the stacks through a small battery-operated counting machine that he had brought in a leather case. That description, in combination with the initials from the ledger, in combination with the 7 names, in combination with the 4 courier routes and the 3 Hawala locations and the financier in Dubai, became, over the next 9 months, the foundation of a coalition intelligence operation that resulted in 47 arrests across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the United Arab Emirates. The disruption of 3 separate planned attacks against coalition forces in eastern Afghanistan, including one attack on a forward operating base in Khas province that, according to the after-action review I read in 2023, would have killed an estimated 11 to 19 United States soldiers if it had gone forward as planned on the night of the 14th of October, 2007. The seizure of approximately 11.4 million United States dollars in cash and frozen assets between October of 2007 and April of 2008. And on the morning of the 17th of April, 2008, in a compound 41 kilometers southwest of Kandahar, the killing of the man with the small scar above his left eyebrow and the hands that shook when he counted money. He was killed by a JDM drop from AB 1B Lancer at 0342 local time. He was sleeping when it hit. His wife was in the next room. She survived. 2 of his children survived. One did not. The one who did not was 7 years old. Her name was in the after-action review. I'm not going to say it here. I am not going to say it because the entire reason this video exists, the entire reason Anki Lindqvist talked to me on the phone for 2 hours and 17 minutes in October 2023 and let me read what she let me read, the entire reason she did not slam the receiver down when I told her what I was working on was that she wanted somebody, somewhere, to understand that the operation she made possible in that room in July of 2007 had a cost that did not appear on any after-action review and did not appear in any commendation and did not appear in the Bronze Star with Valor device that the United States Army awarded her in a quiet ceremony at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, on the 11th of September, 2008. The cost was the 7-year-old girl in the next room. The cost was a man named Muhammad K., still alive, still in custody, who in his last lucid hour with Anki Lindqvist on the 30th of July, 2007, the day before he was transferred to Guantanamo Bay, asked her a question that she wrote down word for word on the last page of her report, and that I have read approximately 40 times in the 16 years since, and that I'm going to read to you now. He asked her, quote, "Why didn't you hurt me the way the others tried to?" End quote. She wrote down her answer underneath his question. She wrote it down because she knew, even in that moment, that what she said next was going to be the only thing about that 14 days that was worth keeping. She wrote, quote, "Pain makes you lie. Kindness makes you remember." End quote. That is the last line on the page. Underneath it, in different handwriting, somebody on the J2 staff has stamped classified, secret, no foreign, and signed the page and dated it the 31st of July, 2007. That is the end of the report. Day 14, the 31st of July, 2007, the day of the transfer. She did not have a session with him scheduled that day. The transfer was at 0600 hours. The flight to Guantanamo was AC-17 with a 4010E manifest. He was the second name on the manifest. At 0445 hours, Anki Lindqvist walked from her quarters to the holding area where Muhammad K. was being prepared for transport. She was not authorized to be there. The MP on duty knew her. The MP did not stop her. The MP stepped back from the cell door for approximately 90 seconds. The MP did not file a report on those 90 seconds. The 90 seconds do not appear in any document I have been able to obtain. I know they happened because she told me they happened. In those 90 seconds, she handed Muhammad K. a small object through the bars of the holding cell. The object was wrapped in a piece of paper towel from the chow hall. It fit in the palm of his cuffed hand. The object was the paperback Penguin Classics edition of the collected poems of Jalaluddin Rumi. 287 pages. Cover price $9.95. Cover slightly creased at the upper right corner from having lived in the side pocket of a rucksack for 3 deployments. It was the book her mother had given her in the autumn of 1996, 2 months before she shipped to basic training at Fort Jackson. It was the book that had been in the side pocket of her rucksack at every duty station, every deployment, every interrogation, every cup of tea she had drunk alone in a room with a stranger across a metal table. She gave it to him. She did not say anything. He did not say anything. He held it. The MP came back. She walked out. She walked back to her quarters. She did not watch the C-17 take off at 0600 hours. She wrote her after-action report on the 1st of August, 2007. She filed it on the 2nd. She received the Bronze Star with Valor Device 13 months later. She did not invite her mother to the ceremony because her mother was dead. She did not invite anyone. She drove from Fort Huachuca to a diner in Sierra Vista after the ceremony and ate a grilled cheese sandwich and drove back. Muhammad K. arrived at Guantanamo Bay on the 31st of July, 2007. He was held there for 11 years and 3 months. He was released on the 14th of October, 2018, after a periodic review board determined that he no longer represented a significant threat to the security of the United States or its allies. He was transferred to Oman under a resettlement agreement. He was given a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood of Muscat. He was given a stipend. He was forbidden from returning to Afghanistan. In April of 2019, 18 months after his release, the United States Embassy in Muscat received a letter addressed, by name and former rank, to Chief Warrant Officer 3 Annika Lindqvist, United States Army. The embassy forwarded the letter to the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense forwarded it to United States Army Intelligence and Security Command. INSCOM forwarded it, after a 6-month review for operational sensitivities, to Chief Warrant Officer 5 Annika Lindqvist, who by that point had been promoted twice and was serving at a location I am not going to name. The letter was 1 page. It was written in English. The handwriting was small and careful. There were 3 lines. The first line was, quote, "I am alive. I am in Oman. I am well." End quote. The second line was, quote, "My mother would have liked you." End quote. The third line was his signature. The book was not mentioned. She did not write back. She's not allowed to write back. There are regulations. She told me, on the phone in October of 2023, that she keeps the letter in the lid of her field locker, next to the photograph of her mother in the yellow sweater in the kitchen in St. Paul in the summer of 1989. She told me that she takes them both out once a year on the 2nd of June. The 2nd of June is the day Fatima K. died in a village in Paktia province in 2007. She did not explain to me why she chose that date and not another date. I did not ask. Her name is Annika Lindqvist. She goes by Anki. She is 49 years old. She is a Chief Warrant Officer 5 in United States Army Counterintelligence. She is on a duty assignment I cannot describe. She is, as of the month I am recording this, on the selection list for promotion to Chief Warrant Officer 5. I beg your pardon, she has already been promoted to CW5. She is on the next list, which is for a position, not a rank, and which I cannot describe either. She is still serving. The Book of Rumi is in an apartment in Muscat, Oman, in the possession of a man named Muhammad K., who is 50 years old, who has not seen Afghanistan since 2007, who has not seen his mother's grave, who has, according to a single line in a single letter, written exactly one sentence about Anki Lindqvist in 11 years. The sentence is, quote, "My mother would have liked you," end quote. That is the record. That is what I have. That is what she let me have. There is an envelope on her desk. I have not seen it. She told me about it. It is a manila envelope, 9 by 12 inches, slightly bent at one corner, with her name written on the front in her own handwriting in black ink. Inside the envelope is the letter from Muscat, the photograph of her mother in the yellow sweater, and a single sheet of paper on which she has written, in pencil, the names of the 7 people Mohammed K. gave her on the 27th of July, 2007, and the date on which each of those 7 people died, or was captured, or in 2 cases disappeared. She has not opened the envelope in 4 years. She told me she opens it on the 2nd of June. She told me she will open it again next year. Stan, watch with me a minute. That's all this is. A watch. No subscribe asked tonight. Just sit with it.